Okay, I am informed it is 6 o'clock, time to start the meeting, and I welcome you to the Common Council meeting of the City of Marshfield for Tuesday, July 12th. And we have a quorum present. Everything's fine there. So if you'd love to please rise, we'll do the salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. That brings us to the public comment period. At this time, we'll recognize those members of the public who have indicated a desire to address the council. Upon recognition, the persons may address the council, first stating their name and address. The council may act on emergency matters introduced by the members of the public. The first one is Dottie Schnitzler. Dottie?
Hello, everybody. My name is Dorothy Schnitzler. I live at 709 South Cherry, Marshfield. Thank you for the opportunity that you offer the citizens here. Appreciate it very much. I want to say a very great thank you to Tom over here and Mike over here for filming our events at the Belvedere Supper Club. We've been doing that for over 3 years now, and we've had many speakers, political and school board and all these great things. So what I'd like to do is let you know what's coming up this coming Thursday at the Belvedere. It's the 14th of the month, and every second Thursday is when we do have our events. Open to the public, and they always have a menu if you want to eat ahead of time. And this Thursday, we're showing the documentary DVD called 2,000 Mules, and all of you are invited. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next person who's asked to speak is Mike Weigel. Been a familiar face in here for many years. Mm-hmm. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mike Weigel, 714 North Cedar Avenue. I'm here to talk to you about low power radio. As many of you may have noticed, WDLB radio has gone through a drastic change in ownership, and as a result, a drastic change in its format, which unfortunately doesn't allow much for its listeners. Sure, I like music as much as the next guy, but there comes a point where you gotta turn the music off because your brain starts to turn to mush, and you need something more to stimulate your brain. Now, we lost Insight, we lost the general store. Those are two very important things that WDLB had going for it and its listeners. Now, I'm talking to you about low power radio because I believe low power radio can fill that vacuum that we lost with WDLB. So, in the interest of free speech, and who here doesn't like free speech? I don't see any hands, so you must all like free speech. I'm asking you to reconsider low power radio in this city, not because it's something cool, but because it's going to fill a gap for the citizens. We can't wait around for the newspaper, for a week for the newspaper to come out and tell us the news that we already know. We need news now. And I believe that low power radio will be able to deliver. Mr. Chairman, I yield to you.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate that. Appreciate that very much. That is on the agenda for tonight, too. The discussion, anyway. Next up is the approval of the minutes of the June 28th, 2022 meeting. That's in your packet. What's your pleasure? What do you need? We have a motion. Motion by Handler, second by O'Reilly to approve the minutes. All those in favor, please say aye.
All right.
Nay? Nobody, okay. All right, next up is staff updates. Steve, you have anything?
I do. I will head over to the podium. It is my great pleasure tonight to introduce to the council and people seeing at home and others in the audience, our new HR director, Sarah Dressel. Sarah comes to us with a wealth of experience, previous experience in HR management, including most recently for Furniture and Appliance Mart in Plover. She's already been contributing in just a week and a half. It's pretty obvious that she's going to add a lot to this organization in many ways. So I just want to welcome her and ask you to join me in just giving her a hand to welcome her to the city of Marshfield.
Okay, item F is council president's comments. I have no comments to add to it tonight. So we'll bring on to council comments. Anybody wish to be recognized? Okay, we'll move on. Reports from commissions, boards, and committees. The consent agenda. It's in your packet. What's your pleasure? Motion by Fisher, second by Fire. Mr. Fisher, is that to approve? Motion to approve, second by Mr. Fire. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Next up, we have two sets of minutes that need to be read in to the council. Will handle them separately. Are you going to take the first one, Jessica? Okay, go ahead.
The meeting of the Judiciary and Licensing Committee of July 12th, 2022 was called to order by Vice Chairperson Paschal at 5:30 p.m. in the council chambers. Present were Alderpersons Paschal, Wagner, and Fisher, Police Chief Goering, Alderpersons O'Reilly, and City Clerk Schiffrel. There was a motion by Wagner and a second by Fisher to approve the minutes of June 21st, 2022 Judiciary and Licensing Committee meeting. There is a motion by Fisher and a second by Wagner to approve by unanimous consent the application for a temporary Class B retailer license for Visit Marshfield for Hub City Concert Series on July 15th, 2022 at Wenzel Plaza, an application for a temporary Class B retailer license for the Personal Development Center for an event August 18th, 2022 at Wildwood Station, an application for a garbage and refuse collector license from D&Z Dumpsters, LLC, 10848 Lincoln Avenue, Marshfield. That motion carried. There is a motion by Wagner and a second by Fisher to disallow the claim of Nathan Barth pursuant to State Statute 893.80 Pran LG. That motion carried. There were no future agenda items, and the meeting was adjourned at 5:33 p.m. by Vice Chairperson Paschal.
Thank you. Dan, you're going to do the Board of Public Works one? By the way, we'll take these both together for approvals.
Thank you. That meeting was called to order by Chairman Paschal at 5:45 in these council chambers. That was this evening, July 12th. Present were Alderman Paschal, O'Reilly, Fisher, Fire, and Marshall, as well as city staff and others. There were no citizens' comments. There was a motion by Fire, second by Fisher, to recommend approval of pre-qualification of additional contractors for the 2022 construction projects as presented. And those contractors were Cruiser Construction of Green Bay, Wisconsin, and James Peterson and Sons of Medford, Wisconsin. That motion carried. There being no further business, Chairman Paschal adjourned the meeting at 5:47 p.m.
Thank you. So what we need is a motion to add those minutes to the file. Motion by Fisher, second by O'Reilly. Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Yes.
So carried. No? Was that an aye, Rebecca?
Aye.
Thank you.
Council President, are we going to vote on these tonight, or are we going to just vote by? Are we going to vote on the?
I think on some of the stuff down below here we will.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I had to do a meeting this morning, and I'm not in the habit of using the good stuff, okay? So anyway, okay, the next item on the agenda is the request to authorize a future application for the operation of a low-power FM station, presented by Tom Laux. Tom?
Thank you, Council President and council members. I'm reaching out to you today about creating a low-power FM station that's be operated by our Marshfield Broadcasting Division, which is in our Communications Department, and as well as it be used by community producers. But before we ask, I ask your permission, we would need to apply for a Lpfm license through the FCC. And the window is usually short. And hopefully in 2023, that will take place. The last time that took place was 2013. And I believe former Marshfield Community Television was looking at that option, but it never did come to the council. So I'm asking that when the license time is up or is presented to us, and we're hoping 2023, that you will allow me to apply for that license. There's no cost to apply for the license. And if we were granted the license, we would have 1.5 years to get the station up and running once that license has been issued. Once that happens, after the license, and if all goes well, the build out of the project, as you know, would range from $25,000 to $30,000. We've done a lot of research. We've worked with our IT, we worked with the utility, talked to other stations nearby and what needs to be done. My coworker, David Ballerstein, has experience in the radio area as well. And we've done our research and figured out it'd be cost between $25,000 and $30,000. How would we fund that? You would have to decide on that as well. Possibly a grant, possibly donations. Use a CIP next year, 235 fund, although I'm hesitant to use it because it's earmarked for what we use for all our communications. But it's really a one-time fee. The cost to build this. Running the station is really going to be done by the two people, myself and David, as well as community producers. Why is it important? Easy accessibility to the listener out there. We all have radios. Affordability, very simple. Again, we all have radios. Local information will be presented on that. That's what's missing. We want to bring local information, especially government information, stuff that you're hearing right now. We'd be able to broadcast this meeting as well as any meeting, our programs that we do, as well as open it up to community producers just like our community television, and allow those guys to participate with training. It also increases citizen participation. You get people involved, they come by, they voice their concerns, they're able to do that. So look at it as similar to how we operate our public access television stations. A couple things left, goals. Keep in mind that our goals are for the citizen, to bring information out to the citizen. That's why we're here. That's why we have a communications department, to make sure that we're bringing out information about the city. And we also broaden that with nonprofits as well. The station can be used by city staff, can be used by alderpersons. Election time. So there's a lot of opportunities that we could use the station for. It's a great way to do that. And radio is still very viable source. And I think it's gonna be around for several years, beyond my lifetime. And it's not a very expensive way to communicate on another platform. We're already using a lot of platforms, but that's just another one that I've heard from local residents asking if we would do something like that. So I'll turn it to any questions you may have.
We have a motion by Tompkins and a second by Wetzel, and we're open for discussion. Yes, Mr. O'Reilly.
Tom, I have a couple questions. That $25,000 to $30,000 fee, is that an annual expectation, or would that change annually?
No, it's not an annual. The license is, again, free. This is the hardware and software needed to set up the station. That's also including contractors that would need to do some of the work, put the antenna up on the water tower. They have to be licensed. Really went through the whole thing. So it is a one-time fee. Equipment, as we all know, computers, working with IT, we know every 5 years, pretty much IT goes to that. We need to replace some of that work, some of that. So, but nowhere near into that 25,000. General computer can operate this, and we'd be on the city network, which is really neat because that's how our lift stations are operating out of the tower now. So, same idea.
Mr. Fisher?
Thank you, Council President. I got a few questions, Tom. The first one is, how many other municipalities are using low-powered radios? Do you know?
I did have a number, I think it might be close to 9 here in the state of Wisconsin that are Wisconsin community media members. Those are members that are part of our Wisconsin community media, which is public access channels. The closest one that I know of right now is Stevens Point operates one. They put one in 2013. Wapaka is another one, 2013. Very successful. Hear great things about it. When I lived in Plover, I actually listened to the Stevens Point station on the way to work on Highway 54 to Wisconsin Rapids and could get that clear and listen to their common council meeting. It was kind of nice to hear. And a lot of it, the voice carries everything. And just to let you know about, we're hoping, or not hoping, but we looked at a map, approximately 30-mile radius if we go on the tower by the hospital.
Okay, and then just a follow-up question is, I know you mentioned that it would be staffed by volunteers and yourself and your other staff person, but is that going to be adequate staffing for a low-powered radio? I mean, can you do it with 2 people?
Well, it's just like our television station. About a year and a half ago, we put some new equipment in there for better automation. Not saying that we're automating everything, that it's a robot and it's canned news. You're able to put that stuff that we do, like this meeting, and have it ready to go for weeks on out or a week and play at a certain time. So the manpower will be putting it in, maybe trimming and editing. For our staff, making sure it's operating and functionally like our television station. So it's another duty, yes. It's going to add some time to it, but if everyone knows who I am, want to be very efficient in how I do things. And with the work that we have on our TV, I feel that we can do that. My coworker that's in the back would have probably said no if we couldn't, and feels that we're able to do that with the technology out there today.
All right, thank you.
Alderperson Tompkins.
My question was answered. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Wetzel.
Thank you. My original question was answered, but I have another one.
Okay.
So in terms of the programming, I'm assuming you're not going to necessarily have voice programming that's been developed that can run 24/7. Is there the plan to then supplement that with something else so there's not dead air, or how is that going to be?
Yeah, generally the stations like Stevens Point as well as Wapaka are actually running music on their stations and are able to do that under this kind of license. So we do apply for other licensing in regards to our music on our television station now that we have to do that because we're streaming. So it's a similar license. So there is a cost to that a year, but generally it's not very expensive because we're considered a nonprofit, even though we're a city, we're not making money. So, but to answer your question, yes, we would want to have 24-hour content on the station. I would think some of these meetings would run quite a bit. It depends if they want to hear them or not. It's kind of like the television station. We do run our meetings here 3, 4, 5 times within a week. You may get 1 or 2 people listening, but they have that chance to listen to it. Programs, those other stations actually have a lot of community producers. Madison, Sun Prairie, really a bigger area, but there's a lot of community producers doing their own programs there that have been really popular. And I see that because a lot of people tell me they'd rather be on radio rather than on TV because they don't want to see their face. So I think it actually might be a benefit to get additional community producers out there from the community to probably have a program but we'd keep it just like public access, the same idea, same style. So the content is not changed or anything like we do in public access. It's freedom of speech. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Yes, Mr. O'Reilly.
Thank you. One other question I'd have is there any opportunity for advertising to offset costs, or what are your feelings on that?
Well, there may be an area that we can't do that because of the licensing. We can, and I'm pretty sure we can do is sponsorship. Just like our television, we could get into that kind of stuff as having a sponsor, and you're not listing price and stuff, but this program is brought to you by such and such. You do that on the radio, and they could pay for a spot on that. So it's a little different than your general advertising, what you're selling fishing supplies. So, but yes, I believe so, but I would want to double check.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor to authorize future application. Is that correct? All right, if there's no further discussion, please vote electronically.
Mrs. Spiros?
Ms. Spiros?
No.
Okay. Mine's not registered.
8-1, I don't know what
Okay.
yeah, why is it?
It's a yes. Okay. Thank you. See, I try it your way and look what happens. All right. Okay, next up on the agenda is request to reconsider previous council decision regarding the prohibition of weapons in City Hall. That's introduced by Steve, and it's been requested by Mr. O'Reilly. So Steve, you want to lead it off?
Thank you, I certainly will. And I will make my comments fairly short because, again, this was brought to light by a council member who I think needs to address his thoughts on it. But those of you who've been with us before, council members, people in the audience, people tuned in at home, we have discussed this a couple times over the past 3 years, whether or not to consider removing the signs from this building that say no firearms or weapons allowed in City Hall. Both times in 2019 and 2021, vote was very close, but it didn't pass to lift those signs. Councilmember O'Reilly brought it to my attention that he'd like it on the agenda. I brought it to the attention of Mayor Teestrake and Council President Wagner. They were supportive of that. So I have some information in the packet tonight showing the previous memos that I wrote that have some information about other cities and staff views on this. And I also have the minutes from those meetings included as well. At this point, I'll defer to Councilmember O'Reilly.
Mr. O'Reilly, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Over the course of time, I guess it frustrates me that a local government body like this feels that they have the ability to take away a Second Amendment right of a citizen to protect themselves. I look at that sign out there, for example, and common sense tells me that is going to stop no one that is going to come in here with bad intentions. The only thing it accomplishes is taking away the rights of the other individuals here to protect themselves from whoever that crazy person might be. From what I have read, 85% of mass shootings happen in a soft zone, gun-free zones, where it's quite obvious whoever that deranged person is understands that if they come into that building, they're not going to really have much, if any, someone to counter their actions. I guess from my perspective, I think it's illogical to have it, and I believe that if anything, it makes people more unsafe than safe. Thank you.
The floor is open for discussion, and we have somebody.
No, not yet. And Nick.
Who's that?
And Nick Page.
Nick, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I remain opposed to this idea of allowing weapons in City Hall I'll keep it to 3 reasons tonight. First, the mass shootings that Mike talks about are still a rare occasion. There's probably been less than 500 such shootings in the last 20 years. They make a lot of headlines, but they're still a rare occasion. Second, the fantasy that's been propagated by the NRA and other groups that the only way to stop a person with a gun is, a bad person with a gun is the good person with a gun, is another fallacy. It's, I just read an article that only 5% of all shootings were stopped by a bystander with a gun. And the most important reason of all is that I feel that introducing a weapon into any environment causes that environment to become less safe, not more safe. You're far more likely to have someone accidentally killed by someone carrying a gun into a workplace than you are by having someone walk in off the street and use a weapon. Those are my 3 reasons for tonight.
Do we have anybody else that wishes to speak? Natasha, go ahead.
I just have some questions. Are we allowed to have guns in the library? Are we allowed to bring guns to the police station? Are we allowed to bring guns to the fire station? Okay. That was one of my questions. Thank you. I would also like to know from the city attorney with the email that we had regarding this is a court, and so guns are not allowed in a court. So this specific time isn't, but this building is used as a court. So can people bring a gun into a court here?
Yeah, so that's specifically exempted under the statute. So in a circuit court, meaning like the courthouse in Wisconsin Rapids, there's a prohibition, although there's certain court personnel, judges, et cetera, and with judges' permission, people can carry firearms. But as to a municipal court, there is an exemption, and the prohibition on firearms is only while the municipal court is in session. Kind of this, I think the legislature anticipated that these rooms were going to be used for other things. It wasn't specifically going to be always a courtroom. So for that purpose, it's allowed to, the option of carrying a firearm here when it's not being used with court in session is available by decision.
So would that be this room or this entire building while court is in session?
It would be this room. It is really the municipal court. That would be my interpretation of that. That said, I think that we have municipal court proceedings at times in pretrial conferences in another room, and it probably would apply there.
Oh, so there's another room in this building?
So it just depends on the timing, but we have occasionally in the side room here. That would be pretty much part of this room, but it would be something where court is in session, people are appearing there. There's not a requirement by the statute to provide notice of that. It's intended that by knowing that you can't bring a gun to a municipal court that's in session, people aren't supposed to do it. There'd be no requirement to post that.
So there'd be no requirement to post that if citizens, if there is no concealed weapon sign on the door, if a citizen walks in to do city business and the doors are open for court and they walk in with a gun, there's no sign that says you're not allowed to do this.
That would be correct. I mean, it's the same as we have lots of laws out there that people are supposed to know about that you can't do.
That seems awfully confusing for the general public.
Other discussion? Mr. Witzel?
Thank you. So the sign that identifies this as a gun-free zone, I'm assuming there's something similar at the library. And that's why they're not allowed that's why that's not allowed at the library. And I'm assuming there's something similar at the police department. Okay, so it's a statute for the department. Okay. And does that prohibit everybody from carrying a weapon, or are there some people that are excluded from that exception or from that sign? Sworn personnel, retired military. So That sign prevents the average citizen, but as far as we know, there could be a half a dozen weapons concealed carry in here if we have former police officers or former military that are carrying weapons legally, even though there's a sign posted. Okay, so it sort of leaves a mismatch of who's allowed and who's not. Thanks.
And just to clarify, I'm looking at the city attorney, that same thing would apply here too, with a police officer or certain groups of people who would be in this building, correct?
Correct. That's a statutory exemption for certain people, military, sworn officers. They can correct. In here regardless. That same type of thing for the prohibition that applies to the courtroom.
About a gun within 1,000 feet of a school. And there's like one exception to that. It's that a person who is licensed for concealed carry can carry that gun. I'm asking you if this is right. Can carry a gun within that zone, but a person without a license cannot. Is that correct?
That is essentially the way the statute reads. And there is an exception for, again, the 1,000-foot rule, but you can't, even with a license, automatically carry within the school building itself.
Not the building, but the zone.
The zone, 1,000 foot,
Yeah,
correct.
the zone is what, and that's what's confusing about it,
Correct.
right? Okay, so are we within 1,000 feet? Is this building within 1,000 feet of a school?
That was the reason why I put that in there. I don't know. I doubt that it is, but even if it was, if you fall within that category, then again, that's an exemption. You're not required to, if you're not on that school property, you're not prohibited from carrying within 1,000.
If you've got a license.
Correct.
But without a license, you couldn't. In the zone.
Without a license, you could not.
That's
Correct.
what I was getting at.
Correct.
So that's that. I was wondering if you were taking that school into consideration.
That's the only reason I wrote it. I didn't measure it out. I only know that, that was a function. In fact, part of the reason I did that is I think this came up once before, years ago, when we were, closer perhaps from across the street there, and someone raised that question. And it's, the concern was that we would authorize it, but somebody would be prohibited. That's not the case. It wouldn't apply unless you were on the premises of the school. Then you would not be allowed to carry even with the permit.
The other thing that's been bothering me about this is what we've got is a sign that says no weapons on this property, this site. We have absolutely no way of enforcing that. We don't know who's carrying a weapon or not. We don't have a magnetometer to check it, and we don't have anybody who's here to enforce it, like a bailiff or a well, I guess we usually have our chief of police, who I can't see behind the podium or behind the wall there, but we usually have him with us. But if he's not here, we don't have anybody that could enforce relieving somebody of a gun that was being illegally carried.
Yeah, I mean, arguably, you wouldn't even know it.
Yeah, that's the point I'm trying to make. That we don't know it. So the sign itself doesn't do anything. I mean, having a sign, as Mr. Hendler pointed out long ago, the sign doesn't guarantee that it's going to be a gun-free zone. How do we handle that? You don't have any solution?
This is part of the debate. This is the idea that there is the argument. As a matter of fact, this has been a debate long-standing. It's an issue in the state of Wisconsin. The legislature on the floor allows the carrying of weapons. So, that they've made that election in that setting that it was acceptable to have concealed carry on the floor of the legislature. The question of whether it deters, that's part of what Mr. O'Reilly is raising. It's open to argument. I don't have the answer for that. I know that in the past, one of the issues that's been raised here is a question of liability. By statute, they've exempted liability for any business, employer, person. Of course, municipality would have some protections anyway, but if you allow weapons to be carried on the premises, you're automatically immune under the statute from liability that results from that.
Do we have anybody else? Who's that? Mr. O'Reilly, go ahead. Motion by Mr. O'Reilly to approve, second by Mr. Fisher to remove the sign. Discussion on the motion. Somebody wants to speak?
Tom?
Yes. You brought up an interesting point that just caught my attention. You said by not having the sign, we're exempt if somebody were to carry in and something were to happen. Does that mean with the sign, we're not exempt?
With the sign, the way this, let me put it this way. The statute specifically says you are immune from liability resulting from allowing the carrying of weapons, or not prohibiting, I should put it that way, not prohibiting the carrying of weapons. It doesn't mean anything. I mean, you can't, you're interpreting what does that mean. There's sort of a, I don't know, a legal question. What does that mean? Would that mean that you would be automatically liable because you choose to prohibit and something happens? I mean, there's a lot of, you're asking a question that has a lot to do with tort law and what comes of that. I don't think that you could interpret purely because you have a sign prohibiting that you'd be automatically liable if something happened because you prohibited, or because you prohibited people from carrying and then something happened to them. There's many different reasons why, that would be a very difficult liability issue, particularly for a municipality. Remember, you understand, you can see how confusing or complex this is. The municipality is immune from legislative decisions in the first place. So you have a very strong insulation from making that decision. That said, the statute automatically says that you are immune from liability resulting from allowing firearms on the premises. That would put you in that category automatically, basically immunity. The question of what does that statutory provision mean for the person then that chooses to prohibit it? It probably means nothing either way. It doesn't mean you would be automatically liable just simply because you made that decision. It just means that the immunity by the statute wouldn't kick in, that's for sure.
Well, I guess the concern I have is you post no weapons allowed, but as Mr. Wagner pointed out, technically you're not enforcing it because there's nobody as a gatekeeper to make sure that it's being followed. And so if you post a sign which is not necessarily closely monitored or enforced, now does that open up a liability issue? And that's...
You got me trapped because I'm going to put it this way. There's a lot of debate about what that would mean. And remember, I've got a long history of tort law litigation behind me. So when you're telling me that, I can think of many different things that I would look at if I was trying to sue somebody for that.
I think you're arguing both sides of the case.
I mean, so when you say that, is there a potential? I know the background of this. And everybody here who's had this issue come up before knows that I have a history in terms of gun liability and gun law, okay? So I'm very, very familiar with that, and it gets convoluted if you start asking me, well, is there a way that you could be liable? I mean, there is an argument for that, but it's not clear, and I can tell you that purely because there's a statutory provision that provides immunity for the entity that chooses to allow guns on the premises does not equate to liability if you then deny people that access.
Okay, Brian?
So just want to make clear on the motion, you're only requesting to take the sign down from the City Hall building.
Yes.
Natasha?
So if we take the sign down, does that mean that any staff member who works here can bring a gun to work?
I'll yield to the tort specialist.
Unless you did something else and created a work rule that would apply to staff, then the answer would be yes. You in theory could do something else with respect to employees, telling them that they can't do it, but that would be a work rule. In terms of the law, in terms of concealed carry, the the way the trigger point for that under statute is the sign that basically posts and allows everyone to be treated under those circumstances. Can an employer choose to do something different with respect to its employees? Yeah.
Okay, so there was a survey done of the staff. I think it was 2021 was in your memo, Steve. And 55% of the staff did not want people to be able to carry guns to work. And 45% did. So, I mean, part of it is we have very limited gun data in our country, but we do have data about guns in the home. We know that when guns are in the home, the risk of accidental injuries and discharge is higher. We also know that the rate of suicide is higher and homicides, especially, so we already know that in the home, if there's a gun present, the accidental use of a firearm is higher. We don't have workplace data, but I would assume that if we have a gun in the workplace, our data, I assume, would be similar, but we don't have that data. So I'm just wondering if this is a safety issue, like you said, among workers bringing guns in. And, I just don't think we say if everyone brings a gun, we're going to be safe, but I don't think that's true. I think that's probably a myth. I don't think we have data to actually support that.
The chair will recognize the city administrator.
Thank you very much. And I see Rebecca's hand is up too. Just real briefly, just to follow up on something that you had said, Ed, to clarify. It is true that today in this building, there may well have been somebody who was doing concealed carry and I didn't know it because I had no way of knowing it. But I will say that if I became aware of it, if the human resources director became aware of it, we would certainly address it. It's posted. It's something that's not allowed in this building. If we become aware of it, we'll deal with that issue at the time. But again, think about what it's called and think about how people carry. If we don't know about something, just like anything else in the world, if you don't know about it, you're not going to do anything about it.
I understand Ms. Spiros wants to be recognized.
Thank you. We're throwing around a lot of stats and a lot of what ifs, and I'm going to be clear, I've never supported this sign because I think it's just ridiculous to assume that somebody who has ill intentions is going to be stopped by a sign. And in fact, the FBI did come out with a report, and that was released. The study is released in a report called "Study of the Pre-Attack Behaviors of Active Shooters in the United States Between 2000 and 2013." Where 88% of mass shootings are planned. That means that they're basically premeditated murders. Okay, so if they're going to come into City Hall, they're going to think this through. They're going to plan it out. They're not just going to willy-nilly, stop on the corner and say, hey, let me go into that building. So basically the FBI is saying they definitely target areas that are advertised as a gun-free zone because they want to be able to go in and do as much damage in as short a period of time as possible. So for that reason, along with the Constitution's Second Amendment, I will be voting again to remove this sign. And if there's a big problem with people getting confused on whether they can go into court or not with the sign, we can easily put a sign in the front of the doors that lead into the court part of this, which is the room you all are meeting in, but only when court is in session. And they can hang that up if that makes anyone feel better about a sign doing any good whatsoever.
Okay. Does anyone else wish to be recognized? If not, we will vote. We have a motion by O'Reilly, second by Fisher, to remove the sign that prohibits guns in this chamber. Please vote.
Mrs. Spiros?
Yes.
The motion carries by a vote of 6-4 with one abstention. 6-4. Where'd the abstention come from?
The mayor's not here.
Because you logged in the mayor.
Because I logged in on the other one. Okay, good. Okay. Thank you. That carries. Okay, next up, and this will be going to Steve. This is a staff report on the potential financial and budgetary impact of the real estate tax case with Marshfield Medical Center. Steve, did you do stuff for us here?
Yeah, thank you. Just want to get people updated and just kind of broadly, and then kind of hone in to a little bit of a degree on the specifics in terms of the possible financial impact of the city. Just to get people caught up to speed, Marshfield Clinic Health Systems did file each of the last 2 years for tax exempt status on the main clinic building and the East Wing building based upon the hospital exemption that the state has, effectively saying we're more like a hospital than we are like a clinic or anything else. Both times this has come up in the past, the city assessor has recommended council deny the request based upon not seeing evidence or proof that the clinic was deserving of that hospital exemption. They have, however, gone ahead and filed, and we are in litigation at this point. The whole process of litigation obviously takes time to unfold, discovery, where both sides are providing each other with information that goes on. Coming into the financial piece for a little bit, though, and I'm going to talk in high level in terms of the numbers. In other words, these are not exact numbers, they are approximate numbers. And I did that to avoid getting into the dollars and cents specifically. But for each year, the amount requested in terms of the tax exemption is about $2.8 million total. That's all the taxing jurisdictions. The city is the largest player, slightly over the school district, at about $1.1 million per year that we would have to refund the clinic if, in fact, they were found to be worthy of the tax exemption. That's for 2 years. School district is a little bit less than that, between 900 and $1 million. Wood County is a little over 600,000. Mid-State Technical College is the smallest player at about 140,000 thereabouts. The total value of the two parcels in question, the assessed value of the two parcels, is about $112 million. But putting that into some sort of a context, the total value of all the property in the city is a little under 1.6 million. So you're looking at about, roughly about 7.5% of the total value of real estate property to overall in the city is connected with those two parcels. The city's general fund budget the last year for budget year 2022 is about $23.5 million. So if you look at $23.5 million and you look at possibly losing roughly $1.1 million, that's about 4.7%, give or take, of the city's revenues, general fund revenues that we operate from. So it's significant, there's no doubt about it. Our current tax rate is about $10.51 per thousand evaluation, and I'll touch on what that means in a minute as well. But again, going back to the status of the case, so we're in the litigation process now. Our legal costs to date have been covered by our insurance carrier. That won't be endless, but it is for the time being. I don't believe a specific trial date has yet been established. There's still conversations going on. And just to let you know again, that the court ruling, if we do end up in court, it could be a mixed bag. It could be in favor of the clinic, it could be in favor of the city, or it could be a partial exemption, where it's determined that, for example, one of these two properties is deemed to be 30% exempt. And that's based upon how individual rooms and spaces are used, and that the rest of the facility might be found to not qualify for a hospital exemption. We really don't know until we get to that point. So it's not necessarily an all or nothing. Looking at the budgetary and financial impact, we obviously have to deal with whatever the refund is for these past 2 years, including the one we're in right now. So if it's determined that we owe some amount, we're going to have to dip into general fund reserves because we've not budgeted monies to cover that cost. And that obviously is concerning. I think we all realize that. Staff is looking right now at the 2023 budget in the context of what we ought to look at, perhaps planning on to try and account for at least some level of a loss of revenue from this. We don't know how much. We haven't really gotten into the nitty gritty of what we should plan on, but we're certainly cognizant of it for the 2023 budget because it's very possible that we're going to see some revenue decline. A likely scenario would be a mix, this is my opinion as city administrator and from talking to some of our department head leaders, would be a mix of revenue cuts, revenue reduction. I'm getting this wrong, I should read my own notes. Budget cuts and tax increases. $1.1 million, for example, if we lost the entire amount would be a lot to swallow. It may be less than that, but I think you're going to be looking at reductions in expenses and some increase in taxes. I have not come up with scenarios yet. I think it's way too early to talk about increasing taxes this much, cutting the budget by that much, but we're getting there. I mean, we're in July now. So these are conversations that we're going to have at staff level and then bring to the council at this level in this room as well. I also want to say that other revenue sources that have been talked about in the past may well need to be reconsidered. They're not all popular. Some of them are probably unpopular with some of you in this room. In fact, I know that they are. Things like wheel tax, things like transportation utility or stormwater utility. I'm just throwing out ideas of things that some communities use to try and supplement their revenue. And I realize that when you cut down to it, they really are taxed, whether they're called that or not. But they may be something that you want to bring back onto the table when you look at possible budget cuts to some of our services and programs. I do want to say one more time, though, that I think it's still a little bit too early for that, but we're getting close as we look at the 2023 budget to try and hone in on what a responsible level of perhaps cuts and increases in taxes might be to account for this and to try and keep our services going at the rate people expect. So with that, I will just take any questions that you might have on that overview and try and answer them as best I can.
Mr. Fisher is requested.
Thank you, Council President. I have one question, Steve. You had mentioned possible taxes, wheel tax, and the other one was utility. Can you say that again?
Yeah, a wheel tax, which I think we've discussed before at council level. A transportation utility, which I understand is being used in Wisconsin Rapids, although I'm not familiar with where it's at in the process, but apparently they're moving forward. I know I worked in a community where there was a neighboring community that was working on that too.
And what is that?
That's where you actually, to the best of my understanding, I haven't looked at the Rapids model, but I know from the community that I saw it being used in before, is where you assign a certain value to businesses. For example, you own a drugstore at some intersection. How many cars per day go by there? And based upon the usage of that, kind of determines how much you ought to pay for the upkeep of roads.
Is that just to businesses or is that to residents?
I think it might be all, I guess I'm not sure how down that goes. I wish I'd looked a little bit into the Rapids model, but it was North Fond du Lac that I saw that being done in. They assigned, I think it was mainly commercial because that's where you get bigger frontages and bigger drive-by traffic than on a typical residential street.
And then how much of the budget is staff? How much does staffing, employment, how much does that make up of the budget?
Overall?
Yeah, overall.
Yeah, I mean, we are a service-based business, so out of the $23.5 million in, the budget, probably half or more is somewhere in that neighborhood is related to salaries and benefits and everything that comes with it, health insurance and whatnot.
So
that's not an exact number by any means, but it's compared to a typical business that makes a product, it's a higher percentage.
So just one follow-up, if I may, Council President. So what I'm really hearing you say is if we were to lose against the clinic, realistically, even if we raise taxes or cut the budget cuts will probably have to come in the form of cutting staff, since that's the enormous amount of our budget, or we would have to look at less services, correct?
Yeah, again, I haven't looked at this too deep, but when you look at the percentage of our budget that's staff, you can look at certain services we cut. Even that might ultimately tie back to the people who are most related to providing them. I'm not trying to be alarmist. I don't want to be that way, but if it really were $1.1 million, I think last year we looked at 1% tax rate increase raised about $130,000 or $135,000. So in and of itself, a tax rate increase of roughly 8% would be needed just to account for that. And you're not going to see that happen. I really, just to finish that out, I don't want to speak to whether or not staffing would be involved yet, except if it were the largest amount of money possible, that would be problematic.
Yeah, and my point in asking that question is I think the public has a right to know that if we lose in court with Marshfield Clinic Health System, services or staffing, if you're going to cut your budget, are two things that are going to have to be looked at. And I think the public has a right to know that if that happens, it is a result of us losing in court to the Marshfield Clinic Health System. Thank you.
I'm going to jump in here a minute. This one has been, I'm the one that asked Steve to prepare this. And I am concerned about it. I am concerned about, I agree that it might not be a winner-take-all situation. There's probably going to be some change. But something, when I discussed this with the county treasurer, something that she said just sort of reached out and grabbed me. And one thing we have not considered on this is that what happens, I think you said it's $112 million assessed value of the property?
Correct.
If they win that, that subtracts 112 million from our equalized value. That means every other class of property in the city has to make up that 112 million. And it's not like it's basically their taxes are going to go up no matter what we do, because we aren't going to be able to cut taxes or do it in time, or cut services or whatever, do it in time. So the other part of that is that the part that she told me that was so troubling is that when you subtract 112 million from our tax roll, that plays into the calculation for our levy limit. And not only does it mean we're not going to get that money, that the revenue off of the 112 million, it also means that our levy limit is going to be such that we're not going to be allowed to levy as much as we normally would. So we're going to get it at both ends. So if this thing is critical, and I think I hope our lawyers and I hope our assessors are working overtime on this thing, because this could be devastating. And Steve pointed out, we're a service industry. Whereas public service is our game. That's what we do. We provide services to the public. And it means that if we have to cut anything, it doesn't matter whether it's people or money, because we're giving up services to the citizens of Marshfield. And that's what I'm very concerned about. And I think the public needs to know this, and I think they better, if this thing goes south on us, which I hope it doesn't, but if it goes south on us, there are going to be some very, very tough meetings in this room. And I just want everybody to know about that. I see, Ms. Tompkins, did you wish to be recognized?
Yes, thank you. Can you clarify? So you said that if we do not receive 1.2 million, that 1.2 million has to be made up by other landowners who in their property tax.
That's correct.
So every single person who has property tax in the city will be making up.
Would see an increase of some portion of that 112.
And do we completely make it up?
The weird thing about that is they don't reduce the levy amount that you're at, that your present levy amount. So basically, they're going to determine everything to reach that amount. There's the percentage, and then there's the actual dollars, right? Okay, but at the same time, that at some point in time, this is going to go down a little bit, and then you're going to have to adjust again. I mean, it gets pretty complicated. I mean, I hope I'm explaining it. I haven't.
No, I'll just kind of add to what you're saying, but no, you're saying the right thing. Picture this as a pie. And, right now the pie is $23.5 million that we collect to have our services provided under the general fund, that portion of the budget. If in fact, $112 million of assessed valuation goes away, the remaining people are going to, unless we cut the budget, the remaining people are going to pick up a greater share of that $23.5 million cost. That's why we would talk about either, cutting the budget or increasing the tax rate or whatever. Because otherwise, if you just take that pie the way it is and take that one slice out, everybody else would pick up a greater share of the overall budget amount. All things being simplistically equal.
Right. Without, if they told us we could levy the same amount the next year as we did last year, and we didn't have that extra assessed value there, everybody's would go up. That help a little bit?
Yeah, okay, so that's if we say we want this much, we want our pie to be this big. Okay, so it's not like we're forced to make our pie this big. You're saying the levy might be lower anyways.
Yes.
But then if that's the case, if the levy's lower, then we get into the cutting of services or personnel because we just don't have the funds.
Right.
There's a certain amount of money we levy every year in property taxes, okay? And what levy limits say, you can't levy any more than that, except for a minor increase that you get for new growth to be able to service new areas, new subdivisions or whatever. But you can't levy anything more than you did the previous year. And that's a lesser amount than 23.5. That's the amount that's tax provided. And so, I mean, what it would really come down to is, again, very simplistically, are you going to cut the budget amount to meet that difference in reduced assessed value that you're spreading it over, or are you going to try to increase taxes to the best of your ability, to the allowable degree,
They limit how much we can raise the taxes. So that amount that they're going to give us is going to be less. And that's, so we're going to be, we're going to be faced with some tough choices. Okay. Any other, who's that? Mr. Witzel.
Thank you. Just a real quick question about staffing. Ballpark 50%-ish of our budget is staffing. Of that 50%, what percentage is public safety, meaning fire and police?
Police and fire are the largest portions of the general fund budget just because they have the most employees, they have the biggest operations. So I would suspect if you put police and fire budgets together, you're probably somewhere around, maybe close to 40% of the overall general fund budget.
Thank you.
Somewhere around there, yeah.
Maybe slightly less. I'm not doing the math in my head.
Anybody else? Okay, well, Steve, thank you for that, and please keep us informed as to where the court case is going.
I will. I'll keep you posted. Certainly, we're keeping up to date on what's happening with the case in different ways, but certainly know that as we get closer to the budget, we're going to look at some scenarios here.
Thank you. Next up, and Steve still didn't lose his place here. This is a staff report, update on soliciting labor law services through a request for qualifications process. And Steve's taking that one.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Fisher brought this up a while back, and I do apologize one more time to Adam for the fact that it got lost in the shuffle of some other things. But he kind of brought it up on the tail end of some things we were going through with employment law issues, that we have not really bid out our labor law services for, I can't find one we have. We've used Von Briesen for a long, long time without an agreement, it appears. We've just, called on them as needed. So the idea of maybe doing some sort of a solicitation, finding out who's out there in the employment law world, and having a formalized process to pick somebody. And I think we should have an agreement with them that's more formal, whoever that turns out to be. So what you have in front of you, going off that, and I think the council's direction was to go that way. What you have in front of you is a very short request for qualifications, because we're just asking them to tell us basically who they are, what they do, who the key people would be that would work with us, what are their backgrounds, what services do they provide, and find out who we might be interested in talking with. The model we use for assessors is the one I'd like to use here. Get the people who submit qualifications, get the firms, and then see out of that who we most want to work with if possible, and then try to hone in, talk with them and see if, what the price would be and whether or not we can reach agreement. If we can't, we look at the next one in line if price is out of the realm of possibility. But it's probably the best way to go to find out what they have to offer before you hone in on price. What I also have given you is a proposed timeline over the next three and a half months to do this, with the idea that we'd have somebody up and running on January 1st, 2023. And again, I don't presume it won't be the current provider, but, and I would like to see us sign an agreement. If you look at the RFQ that I put out there, request for qualifications for you to look at tonight, I want to call your attention to the fact that I'm suggesting maybe we have a 5-year agreement with them initially. I know with the city attorney, we've gone less than that. We've oftentimes done a 3-year agreement, even 2. But I think if we sign somebody on, I think whoever it is, they might want to see a slightly longer agreement at first, because they're going to commit resources and time to cases that will probably go on for periods beyond 2 or 3 years. But that's up to you. If you prefer that I rein that in, I will do so. And let me know that right now, actually, if you're concerned about that long a time period. My goal would be by Friday of this week to send it out to a list of people that I know do this kind of work, and then take responses for 3 weeks and go right into this timeline that I've outlined.
Discussion. Do you want to leave it as a 3-year or a 5-year or a 3-year? Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Council President. I'm comfortable with a 5-year. I just think it's after all of the issues we had over the last couple of years with employment law, I think it's very important that we do this RFQ and that we do have an agreement of some kind so that we can hold them accountable, because I did not always feel like I had high confidence in everything they were doing. So I'm totally comfortable with this, and I would be comfortable with a 5-year.
I have a question on that. We've got two personnel-related cases pending in court now. And the legal fees for those are being handled by our insurance company?
Yeah.
It's actually their lawyers.
Yeah, actually, the League of Wisconsin Municipalities Insurance is taking the lead on those. I'm trying to think what our current labor law attorney is involved with, and I don't think it's much of anything at this point. If it were current cases that they were involved in, we'd want them to finish them up, but that doesn't seem to be where we're at right now.
Two questions were, would they finish out that, or would we just switch lawyers in the extreme? Apparently not.
Yeah, the cases I'm thinking of are being handled by outside legal counsel appointed by our insurance carrier.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to just comment that, so there isn't anything wrong with looking at a 5-year contract, but with those types of services, first of all, normally what will happen is you will have an out clause in that anyway. The one thing about it is if you go down that path, and I'm assuming that that's going to be the case anyway, it's not typical where you lock in a 5-year contract with that type of services. They're usually case incident type things. You obviously consult with Von Briesen on a regular basis, but I don't think you have to get locked in the 5-year. The distinction is that on the contract that you have for city attorney is there's actually a statutory requirement that you have an ongoing person that's designated, whereas these are specialty services. So I'm just saying that I don't know that you need to get to that question of, is somebody locked in for 5 years or 3 years or whatever? You definitely want to look to the option of, if you get into an agreement like that you can get out in case you would have a bad experience.
I guess maybe I got over concerned thinking that somebody new coming on board, they're going to start a relationship with our HR director, they're going to start a relationship with me and start building something that they don't want to have it pulled out from underneath them too quickly, because there's going to be time invested in some of the employee policies and concerns going on. But I'd be comfortable with 3. I'd be comfortable. I mean, I tend to agree with Adam that it'd be nice to have something formal that we don't really have right now with our current provider. But it's up to the body.
So if there's no questions, we'll just tell Steve to proceed.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is staff report, anticipated cost to film and broadcast all city meetings. Mr. Lauf, you get the podium again. Your lucky night.
Thank you. All right, had a recent council meeting. Mr. Witzel asked to see if all our city meetings could be video recorded. I just want to provide you with some options. I did list them in your council packet, but here is some background information for this meeting. Currently, there are 25 public meetings that are listed on our city website. Not all those meetings are monthly. Some are less than others. Some are more regular. Some are 2 times a month. Currently, 9 of those meetings are being filmed, such as this meeting now, by our communications department, and now plus the school board, which is going to be done on a freelance basis. This would require 2 of us to record an additional 16 meetings, but not again, all those are monthly. So I broke down some options which are listed in your packet. Option 1 would be using our current method, which we're doing today. Having a person man the camera, either if it's back behind the wall here or taking a camera and set up on location. That requires quite a bit of work, and I try to estimate the best I can, although meetings run long, sometimes they're short, sometimes they're not at all. So it's really hard to determine that, but I looked at 15 to 20 hours additional time to do those meetings. Again, some weeks could be less, some could be more. I'm averaging that per week. We don't have that. So going to option 2, which is one that I recommended. Purchase cameras and audio that are more network-based. And what I'm talking about network-based is more in the IT field. We can do that with the current system that we have now. It would be unmanned. The camera would be similar to a security camera, but better. For instance, a wide view of the entire council, along with the audio. That would give the residents, viewers, a chance to hear and see the meetings. We won't get as nice quality as zooming into each of you, but it's an option, and we can program that stuff ahead of time. But it needs to be on the city network. And not all our areas that we do meetings or meetings are taking place, like the airport, are on the city network. But we do have 2 places currently that are working, this room right here, as well as the fire department. I would suggest that we would put cameras in the conference room next to us, as well as the wine room, and then ask that all meetings would take place in one of those 4 venues. Cost, generally $3,000 to $5,000, camera and audio. Time, again, we put it in our allotted time, what we do. It's important. I'm hearing a lot of people happy that we're covering additional meetings that were asked a few council meetings ago. That we can always look at things that we currently do and maybe eliminate those to fill this gap, because we're hearing people want more meetings. Option 3, just record the audio. That can be done as well, done in the same way. We would have to have audio bars similar to what we have at the fire station, as well as in that conference room now. And we wouldn't use mics like this. But with the technology today, those are pretty good, pretty amazing. They have about 18 mics within that little bar. So it's different than what we had done previously. And again, I would use IT's help with that of installation. So there's time involved in that. But again, that's generally a one-time fee. And I'm hoping that it can be just done within our regular allotted hours. Option 4 is provide a video update of every meeting. That means a short video update, a lot shorter than council, post-council news conference that we do with our city administrator. This would be shorter. So we're making sure that we're providing that update, but it's not easy to do that. It takes people's time, and I would have to track down that information and probably get those people to want to be on camera, and that's not so easy. So right now, my recommendation is, again, option 2, if we were to do something like that. We could also survey the public. We're going to have a new survey tool coming out probably in the fall, once we get it up and running. That's meant for surveys. In the meantime, we can use Constant Contact. Good amount of subscribers on there, and it's used a lot with our city newsletter. Social media, website, TV, we can do our survey there if that's something you would want to do, to survey the public to see if there really is a need to do all these meetings. But I do hear people are happy that we're covering the additional meetings, and I just wanted to provide you that with those options. And if you have any questions, please ask.
Brian?
Tom, I assume that you and your associate right now are working overtime during the course of every day, every week, because you guys have a lot that's going on right now.
Yeah, well, we try to manage our time best as we can. A lot of it can be considered split shifts. Most people don't like that. So David came in late this morning to accommodate a meeting like today. So do we get to work 7:30 to 4:30? Unfortunately, no, not in this kind of field. But we know that. That's what we got into. We knew that. But we do work a lot of time, and we can't have overtime. Again, I'm salaried. That doesn't mean I should go out and work on 90 hours a week. We don't want to do that. Right. So we have to be mindful of that. And that's why I was looking at option 2. Now, there is going to be extra time in there. Anytime you add stuff, it creates more work. What can we cut? There are things that I think we can cut that we do. So, but yes, to answer your question, yeah, it's going to add quite a bit more work.
So with the extra work and the extra time, it would almost be feasible that it would be a extra person hired to the communication department, or at least a part-time person.
Yeah, that would be very beneficial. I know it was talked about well before we started this communications department, before I was here, can 2 people do this job? Well, we have really grown and have done so much more than I feel that maybe was thought about back in 2018. And, but is the money there? That's the concern, because we are funded only on the 235 fund, which are cable franchise fees. There is no funding of our department, our salaries, any of our stuff out of the general fund. There are ways to change that in the budget. That's something that myself, Steve Barg have talked about, that maybe we would look at other funding sources. It's actually in our strategic plan, which would require not generally meetings, but things that we do for city departments. Maybe there's some help in that area that would provide more money to pay a part-time employee. And I think we could be able to easily find them. We do have community producers out there that are doing everything for nothing. And we've gained those. And that's how, there are those people would love to be part of it.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Witzel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Couple of things running through my brain. First of all, I'm not asking at this point that we do this, that we go ahead and record every meeting. I just think it's important for visibility, especially in light of the discussion that took place a month ago, that this body understand the expense, both time and resource and equipment, to be able to provide this. I appreciate you putting this together. You said that currently those meetings that are off-site, specifically Utility Commission and Park Rec and Forestry that were recently added, that's requiring a person to go with equipment and do the filming.
That is correct.
All right. Have you considered option 2 for the Park Rec and Forestry?
Yes, we have.
Okay. And that's not feasible at this time?
In the past, we've used IT to fund some of that, like our police and fire. They had helped purchase the cameras to do that. I would have to ask Eng if that is a possibility, if he has it within his budget for this year, or we could put it in the budget next year. I think that would be a possibility.
Okay. I think that would be beneficial to preserve your and your associates' time. The more we can automate, the better, to free up the time that's more valuably used elsewhere. Another comment was made by one of my colleagues, and I believe it was Mrs. Spiros, who said something about, let's go ahead and film these, let's monitor the viewership, let's find out if they really are, in fact, as highly desired as we're led to believe. And I believe that that's a great plan. The only concern I have is there a way to judge viewership on cable access?
There is not at this point, unless we were to pay for a service, as I'm understanding through Nielsen. It's not cheap. I was told that it could be possible that your Nielsen ratings, which is always done by advertising, but can do that. I never did pursue it anymore, but Charter Communications had led me to that direction. They won't do it, but you would have to talk to a subcontractor, similar to the program guide that is on our cable provider, on our cable stations. We don't have it. If we did want it, we'd have to pay for that as well.
Okay. And I guess just the other final comment, I understand the argument and I understand the decision, though I don't necessarily agree with the decision made by this body regarding the filming of the school district meetings. I really still feel that we have a very large entity that touches a whole lot of lives who are unwilling to waver on what the public wants from them. And that really bothers me, that once again, we as a city are asked to pick up the pieces for an entity that has their own funding source, that is totally independent from us, their own decision-making, and here we are taking it again. And in light of the discussion we had earlier and the potential budget issues we're having, that is of great concern, and it really frustrates me, and I wish the public would outcry a little bit more on that. Why are we using city tax money to pay for school district filming when it should be school money that's paying for that? But I'll get off my soapbox on that. I guess the only thing I would recommend is maybe if you could look into option 2 for Park Rec and Forestry, and then we can address various meetings as they come up, as people request. Thank you.
Steve.
Thank you. I just want to touch on a couple things. First of all, I think that Tom's recommendation is well-founded. The number 2, to the best of his ability to to outline options and pick one. But I want to go back to what's been said by council members Varsho and Witzel and kind of extrapolate more from that. As a two-person department, you're being pulled a lot of different directions. And I like the idea of trying to get public input and feedback on what people want to see. And I agree, you know, we're not going to be on the Nielsen ratings, most likely, but you have something you're getting right now, another public input or public participation type of thing. You can do surveys from that. That's been money that's already been approved by this body, and you're working that out. Any way we can use that product to do surveys and find out what people are thinking. If people all want to see some of these meetings, that's great. But I'm concerned that we're going to stretch as long as we have two people, you and David, too far without really the knowledge, I think, as Councilmember Witzel was saying a minute ago, or somebody was, of even whether or not people want to see these meetings. And I think I'd go slowly on that one and go for some real data. If we can get whatever kind of data we can get to support whether or not people are really expecting or desiring to see all these meetings before we start diving in to the deep end.
Go ahead, Tom.
I would recommend that to do that and bring it to our communications committee because this was on our agenda quite a while ago. One of the reasons why we didn't film the school board, we were doing that when I first came, and they wanted to make sure we had enough time to do some of the other work. They felt it was very valuable to do that versus other things. But I think it'd be good to hear our communications committee weigh in it and then recommend their thoughts to myself as well as this body. And I think we do 3 to 4 month survey here and come back in the fall and see where that goes. But I do like the idea of what Mr. Witzel said about automating some of these meetings, especially in the wine room, and the utility, if that is possible. I'm not sure about the utility because of their networking, might be on a different network, but that's something I'll work with our IT department on.
Okay, no action?
It was put as no action for tonight. I mean, you can certainly suggest that it be on as an action item for the 26th if you feel so led.
What's your pleasure? Just let it go? Okay. Okay, so we'll talk again.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Next up is adjourned to closed session pursuant to Wisconsin statutes, chapter 19.85, sub 1, sub E, deliberating or negotiating the purchase of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. The items are possible sale of city property, McGee Street, Pine Street area, possible transfer of former city property located at 8th and Hemlock, and possible assistance for a project located within TIF District Number 10. Do I have okay, what have I got here? I've got a first by Witzel, second by Tompkins. Roll call, please. Don't just vote?
Spiros?
There, okay.
Yes.
Rebecca?
I don't see her anymore.
Okay, we are in closed session.